So welcome. So on behalf of Milson Precinct, our members and all the candidates, I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging the Cammeraygal people whose lands we meet on. We recognise their continued connection to the land and waters of this beautiful place and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. We pay our respects to all Cammeraygal elders and ancestors and any First Nations people here today. You may have noticed that I jumped straight into an acknowledgement of country on behalf of everyone. This is so we can get straight into it. This means that no candidate needs to acknowledge country. So my name's Estelle Blair and I'm the Secretary of Milson Precinct. We're a community-based group that meets monthly to facilitate discussion between residents and North Sydney Council. Now, the reason why we are all here. Our moderator for tonight is Katie Richmond. Katie is the Head of Industry Engagement at the University of Sydney and also a local resident. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie to kick off.
Thanks, Estelle, the formidable Estelle for this evening, and to Milson Precinct, and of course to Loreto for kindly providing this beautiful hall for us this evening. I've got some housekeeping that I just need to check off. The toilets are just over there to the left. You'll see the sign, they're just up some stairs. And in case of emergency, I've been told that if everybody could please follow the staff down the stairs. So before we kick off, I'm just going to let you know what to expect and go over some ground rules. We have a tight schedule. Each candidate provided a short bio, which I will read, and then we'll get into questions. Milson Precinct has garnered questions from across the community. They've done an amazing job to pull together a list of 7 key questions covering the most common topics of interest to the community. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer each question. Estelle will ring a bell at 1 minute 15 as a warning and to wrap up. And I ask candidates to please respect these time limits. Following the Q&A, we've decided to have a fun quick fire round. This has just really been in response to the large volume of questions that we did receive, and it allows us to cover multiple issues in a short space of time. I will ask closed questions, and each candidate will hold up a card saying yes, no, or maybe to let us know where they stand. After the quickfire round, each candidate will have an opportunity for a 1 minute pitch to the audience on why you should vote for them. So a few rules. Candidates, to make this fair and to keep to time, please give your answers to the time frame we've been given. Audience, please be respectful to the candidates. We would ask that you refrain from calling out during or after responses, either in protest or encouragement. Okay, so let's crack on. I'm going to start with bios. The candidates wrote these themselves, and I'm going to go through them in the candidates as they appear on the ballot paper, starting with Informed Medical Opinions Party. So Michael Antares is the Informed Medical Opinions Party candidate. Oh, sorry, Options Party. Sorry, I apologise. That's going to be my only mistake tonight. Vaccine damage at the age of 25 changed his life irretrievably and led him to an alternative natural medicine and spirituality. Once a Buddhist monk and later a resident, performer and music therapist at a Queensland health farm, he now enjoys semi-retirement and welcomes the opportunity to stand for his beliefs in the political arena with IMOP. Michael supports the no vote in the Voice to Parliament referendum, believing it to be racist, divisive and unnecessary. Independent Helen Conway has lived in the North Shore for 28 years. She's been a senior executive at NRMA and Caltex, has over 20 years experience as a director of companies such as Westpac Insurance, Endeavour Energy, Sydney Ferries, Catholic Healthcare, and 10 years experience practicing law. Helen is a champion for women, having directed the Federal Workplace Gender Equality Agency and been the senior judicial member on the New South Wales Equal Opportunity Tribunal. Helen has a history of community service as a volunteer solicitor for women at Redfern Legal Centre and as chair of Women for Election Australia and the YMCA. She has a reputation for integrity and getting the job done. Labor candidate Godfrey Santa is the elected Deputy Mayor of North Sydney. He has lived in the North Shore area for more than 30 years, raising both children and grandchildren here. An economist by training, Godfrey has represented Australia as a diplomat from within nations such as Iran, Vietnam and France. When he returned to Australia, Godfrey worked as a senior bureaucrat in our National Tourism Bureau before he and his wife Judy founded a local business in the tourism industry. In 2021, Godfrey was elected to the North Sydney Council. He was subsequently chosen to be its deputy mayor in a unanimous vote, 10-0. The Greens candidate, James, works for the local newspaper, the North Sydney Sun, and local basketball club, the Bears in Crow's Nest. He's a Wollstonecraft local who previously ran for North Sydney Council. James moved to Waverton as a teenager while also attending St Aloysius College. Professionally, he has worked for the NGO, the Cardinal Project, Luna Park, the Australian Jesuits, as well as in hospitality, retail, sports media, marketing, and as electoral officer for the state and federal MPs. Felicity Wilson, the Liberal candidate. As a member for North Shore and a mum raising her young kids locally, Felicity understands and has been a strong advocate for what our community values and needs. Her efforts have ensured that New South Wales leads the nation in tackling climate change, improving women's rights, safety and economic opportunities, addressing the challenges facing first home buyers and renters, and ensuring that small businesses have the ability to thrive. Felicity has listened to her community to champion and deliver unprecedented levels of investment in schools, public transport, new parklands and community facilities, ensuring North Shore remains the vibrant community we love. And independent Victoria Walker has engaged deeply with the community for many years, including the precinct system. She has extensive experience in working with Parliament, including as a Director of the New South Wales Public Accounts Committee, its sister committee in Victoria, and for the Commonwealth Parliament's Joint Committee of Public Accounts. Victoria is sick of residents and councils being ignored. Contracts are being signed despite deficits, which limits the next government's capacity to address cost of living pressures, climate change, gaps in health and education, or to restore areas of the state damaged by fire and flood. Neither Parliament nor the major parties were paying attention to these issues, so Victoria is committed to using her skill and experience to work as an independent in Parliament to raise them and to resolve them. Thank you. Okay, so now it's time for, no, it's not time for that. Sorry. Okay, so now it's time for the questions. Have we got a mic down there? There's only one down that end, if you can pass it to Michael. So just to remind you, I'm going to ask questions. Everybody will get a go first, and there's 1.5 minutes with a bell at 1:15. Thank you. Okay, so question 1 to Michael. In New South Wales, we have watched politicians over the past 20 years being pulled up to ICAC on corruption charges on both sides of politics, from O'Beid to Berejiklian. If elected, what will you do to fix the situation?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I'll say my biography is not out.
Just switch the switch on the microphone.
Sorry.
We're all here now. Thank you. My biography is a little bit out. I'm an educator. I've been a teacher for over 40 years. I lived in this area since a child. And know every area of this know every part of this area intimately. I just want to answer that question by saying we very much believe in transparency. This is I'm on the party. Transparency in government in every respect. Accountability from all politicians. We are very serious about this, and we have a wonderful policy, if you go to our website, that just deals with this subject alone. My great uncle was, some of you might have heard of him, Sir Alistair McMullen, who was the longest running member of the Senate in Canberra. And if a member of the Senate did not appear when the party was actually, when they were sitting in chambers, they would be fined. Now, if you watch Parliament, half the ministers aren't there, probably 90% of them. So I would like to return to that part of that state where we have accountability in that respect, and all our members sit when the chamber is sitting. Thank you.
It's very interesting when I go around the community, the issue that is raised most commonly with me is integrity in New South Wales politics. People are very concerned. They say to me, those in Macquarie Street don't represent us. Our values are not the values we see exhibited by our politicians in Macquarie Street. So it's a very big issue. It was interesting, before I agreed to stand, I checked to see if there was a code of conduct for parliamentarians in New South Wales. And there is a code of conduct. But clearly it is not working. It's important, I think, that we address this issue very directly. We need to change the culture. So the things that I would seek to do are as follows. I'd seek to legislate the guidelines for the administration of grants. We've seen a lot of wrong of grants. I'd also seek to have the processes for the appointment of public officials based on merit and transparently so. So those processes are open and understood by the public. We also need to have independent funding for oversight bodies like ICAC, the Auditor General and the Law Enforcement Conduct Commission. And finally, we should have standards, performance standards for the handing down of reports in relation to ICAC.
I think we acknowledge that the track record in the past has not been perfect, but we have taken measures within the party to ensure that corruption is not a feature of our political system. We will ensure that the institutions which have been created to oversee politicians are strengthened and they are enforced. Their rules are properly enforced. We will make sure that the corruption which has become rampant in the government is not repeated when we come into office. The pork barrelling, the favouritism which is shown to certain electorates which vote a certain way has got to stop, and we will take measures to ensure that that takes place. One of the classic examples was the bushfire situation and the terrible destruction that it wrought in some areas, and yet Labor voting electorates didn't get a thing except for one electorate which got a donation of about $100,000. This has got to stop. We will be allocating government funds on the basis of need, not on the basis of political affiliation. We will ensure that corruption is not a part of the new state government of New South Wales.
Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, corruption is out of control in this state. New South Wales is actually known as one of the most corrupt jurisdictions in Australia, and I think that's unfortunate. There's actually the issue that fired me out to run in this election. Since I graduated high school, not that long ago, there's been 4 premiers. We've had 2 step down because of corruption charges and 1 go to join a bank immediately after resigning. And that's disgusting, because tell you what that shows. It shows a complete disregard, a complete lack of respect for the public. It's just about what can I do for my party to win and for my own personal gain. And this needs to stop. And the way we can do that is to strengthen ICAC. As Helen suggested, what the Greens are also proposing is to have independent funding for the ICAC system, so it's not tied to whatever political party or whatever the legislation is at the time. It's independently funded, so it can actually do its job. Right now, ICAC has a $3.9 million shortfall in being able to actually do its job, which is not good enough, because we've seen what ICAC can do and what it's uncovered. We need to actually fully support that to keep the bastards honest. I know it's the Australian Democrats, not the Greens, but we'll give it that one. We have to also change the cultures around political parties. At the moment, every year, $23 million of corporate donations go to the LNP and Labor, which needs to stop. We need to get rid of corporate donations to political parties. Also have a 5-year cooling off period for politicians looking to get into lobbyist jobs and vice versa. We can't have this rotating door anymore.
Thanks for this question, and I think it's important to start with the recognition that the ICAC as an institution was brought into being in New South Wales by the Liberal government at the time.
So the New South Wales Liberals have always had a very strong view about having integrity agencies existing in our state, being independent, being strong, having the powers and the funding that they need to do their work. And I just want to note that every single time the ICAC has sought additional funding to do additional work, it has been provided to them. We've made a range of different legislative changes as well for our integrity agencies. I mean, just late last year, I was introducing and I carried successful legislation to expand the scope of powers for the Auditor General and the Office of the Auditor General. So wherever and whenever I see, or we as New South Wales Liberals see, that there are requests for additional reforms by our integrity agencies, we support them because we know how incredibly crucial they are to ensuring the integrity of our state and our public officials, whether that be politicians or public servants or people appointed to public office. There's a whole pile of other things that we need to do as parties, as a parliament as well. Obviously, we have introduced, for instance, as a Liberal government, the disclosure about diaries, of ministerial diaries, so that all meetings are transparent. We've put in donation caps and limits for donors, and we put in spending caps, expenditure caps for political campaigns. There are a range of things we've done to try and improve the effectiveness, but also the transparency and integrity of the system, and I'm always happy to support more action.
I'm very conscious that I'm standing as an independent, and there's very little that independents can actually do in terms of getting time to speak or to put up legislation as I've proposed to do. So I've laid out at the beginning what my policies are and what I intend to do. I'm not just going to stand there and say this is not good enough. I'm going to say I'm going to take action. Now, one of the things I intend to do is to nominate for the Privileges Committee, which is the committee in charge of ethics and the standards set within Parliament, and also some of the rules, because I'm very aware that Parliament has practically been written out of the legislative program. It met for 42 days last year, and a lot of the time it's there. The members are highly restricted in what they can say or speak about or how long they can speak for. And this is members of the government as well as the opposition. So I think Parliament needs to be brought back. There's democracies threatened all over the world. Let's make sure that our first Parliament can be restored and work as a Parliament. In the Audit Office in Canberra, I did a lot of parliamentary audits because of my experience in Parliament. And one of the most famous was the travel audits, which 2 ministers lost their jobs. So I know exactly where to look and what to look for, and I don't have any qualms about taking on big challenges.
Thank you, and thank you all for keeping to time too. I appreciate that. So question 2, this one will be for Helen first. Pass the mic down. Thanks, Godfrey, to Helen. Sorry. So there were quite a few questions, as you can imagine, on this one and the IQ one. Please explain your position explicitly on the Western Harbour Tunnel. If you are elected, what are your next move regarding this project?
So Western Harbour Tunnel is underway, but not fully designed. We know that the contracts as led are generally, certainly, not consistently, but generally around about 30% designed when they're let. So that leaves contractors with a lot of discretion, and there's still work to be done in determining the final outcome of how the Western Harbour Tunnel will work. Now, in particular, the concern around the Western Harbour Tunnel is what will happen to the traffic congestion on streets, local streets in North Sydney and also Military Road in Mosman. It's said by some that this will relieve traffic congestion. Well, on current indications, there will be significant congestion in Miller Street, in Berry Street, North Sydney, and more traffic on Military Road. So if I'm elected, the first thing I would like to do is press to get some transparency around this project. The common complaint I hear when I talk to people about the Western Harbour Tunnel is that it's opaque, that there hasn't been proper consultation. People don't understand what it is, how it's going to work, where the exits will be, where the smokestacks will be. So for me, it's transparency to examine what is the best for our community.
I think Helen's speech just came out of our plate. We certainly are opposing the expansion of the freeway system in the North Shore area to the extent that it disrupts traffic within the suburban areas of North Sydney and Kirribilli, right the way through to Mosman, because there is a belief that Military Road is going to have less traffic as a result of this project. Well, it's not. It's going to have more traffic because of the removal of the Ernest Street ramp onto the freeway. It means the traffic coming from the northern beaches will have to use Military Road to get onto the bridge and other parts of the Western Harbour Tunnel. As far as the Western Harbour Tunnel itself is concerned, we point out that this was a contract signed, and it was signed in secret. And work has already begun on it, so that if we in government were to come along and cancel it, it could cost the taxpayer perhaps billions of dollars on a reneged contract. We are saddled with the contract, and it's also a secret contract, which means that there are parts of it, elements of it, which we don't know about. But certainly in government, we will ensure that we look at it in great detail to see where it can be amended to ensure that the traffic within our area is not increased as a result of that development.
Here we go again. More mega roads projects destroying our natural environment, inducing more demand for cars, and not giving people a public transport or active transport option. The Western Harbour Tunnel is going to be extremely destructive. Luckily, there is a Greens MP in Balmain who has fought really hard for amendments to change the design of the Western Harbour Tunnel to go from not coffer dams, which would have put up a lot of sediment and have destroyed Callum Park over in Balmain and parts of Berries Bay here in Waverton. Due to the Greens campaign, that is now going to be a boring system. And by that I don't mean it's not very intriguing, I mean boring underground, although infrastructure can be a bit of a dry topic sometimes, but not for us at the Greens, because we're opposing this Warringah Freeway upgrades, we're opposing the Western Harbour Tunnel, because the way to solve traffic is not to build more roads, you just introduce more demand. You have to give people other options, investing in public transport and active transport, but not just throwing money, billions of dollars here, billions of dollars there to rebuild the metro line. We actually need proper investment with proper scrutiny, so these contracts don't just blow out of hand and we just have all these vanity projects. We should not be investing more in mega roads projects. We need to be investing in public transport and active transport.
Western Harbour Tunnel is happening, and it's happening for two reasons. Firstly, because the Liberal government takes independent advice about what infrastructure is needed. So Infrastructure New South Wales, Infrastructure Australia both identified that the two harbour crossings were over capacity, and one of the big impacts of that is when you see any impacts on the Harbour Bridge or Harbour Tunnel, you see all of the traffic backed up in our community, down High Street, down Alfred Street North, all the way through even to where I live in Cremorne. And so that rat running that occurs when those crossings are impacted needs to be addressed, not just for us, but for all the road users. The second reason it's happening is because you've got a government in place that's been able to manage our economy and finances and deliver a record platform of infrastructure across New South Wales, not just in certain cities, but across the entire state. And James, as you know, that's a record level of public transport infrastructure investment as well, on game-changing projects like Sydney Metro coming to us here in North Sydney and Crow's Nest, the B-line out in the Military Road corridor. And the Western Harbour Tunnel is a project that we need. So we're delivering it because the evidence and advice shows that we need it, and we can only deliver it because we can manage our economy to do so. When Godfrey says, I was a little bit wishy-washy there what he said about not liking road projects in some way or another. We've got to be clear that New South Wales Labor supports the Western Harbour Tunnel. They have unequivocally stated that they support it. So in a decision in this election between a Liberal government and a Labor government, you get the same infrastructure outcome, supposedly, except you get a Labor government, potentially, that's not being honest with their local candidate about their position on this.
to what one of my colleagues said, this was announced on the 1st of December. The planning was not 30% advanced. This is common for a lot of transport projects, that they're announced when the interim planning up to about a third is done. At the same time, the Premier announced that this contract had been signed for between $4 and $5 billion. He announced that it was going to be put under the sea. The planning that's been done was for a tunnel on the harbour bed. This is going to be dug through the rock underneath the harbour, which means that the inclination when it has to come back up into the North Shore, it's going to have a much longer climb to get up. So the people of Wollstonecraft and Waverton are extremely concerned. They have no idea where it's going to go. There are no plans, no drawings, and particularly where the ventilation towers for these very deep tunnels are going to go. It's possible also, given the alignment of the harbour bed, that it won't come up through Berries Bay, that it will actually go further west. Nothing has been said about that. So my last concern is that in 6 years' time, when it's done, when this government's going to be burdened, the new government coming in is going to be burdened with this debt, it could very well be a stranded asset. That climate change and the changes that are made in that time. Thank you.
Godfrey?
All's forgiven. Okay. Well, look, I realise this is a local issue, and it's a big local issue that everyone's very much wants to know what's going on. As far as I can see, from start to now, it's an unmitigated disaster. I don't believe people are going to give away their cars. As much as we've got the metro coming through, which is amazing, and everyone's looking forward to that, they're not going to give up their cars. Now, look, I should speak firstly from IMOP's point of view. We're very much supporting regional development. We want as many people as possible to go to regional areas to live, to take a lot of pressure off the city. But at the moment, we're faced with this debacle. Okay, what's going to happen? There's going to be so much congestion in this area. The original plans were to go through all the way to Seaforth and beyond. And I must admit, personally, I believe that's what we should have stuck to, because that way we could have alleviated a lot of the problems of traffic on Military Road. And I get stuck there all the time. It takes me 40 minutes sometimes to get from Wasserman to North Sydney. It's ridiculous. We can't put up with this. And funneling off the freeway onto Military Road, as one of my colleagues said, it's going to be a disaster. I'm sorry, I can't support it. I think they should have gone back to the drawing board, but now we're stuck with it. So all I can say is good luck everybody who drives on the local roads. That's it. Thank you very much.
So question 3 to Godfrey. What is your position on net zero 2050, and how do you intend to get there?
Thank you. We certainly support net zero 2050, and we want a progressive move towards that target. And we will be introducing a number of measures to ensure that we achieve it. We have policies in place, which we've announced, which will ensure that we achieve that target. We want to ensure that there is encouragement for people to go to renewable energy. We will be giving financial incentives for that purpose to ensure that there is a move to renewable energy. We'll be installing community batteries to help with the move towards solar panels. One of the features unfortunately, of living in this area, which has a high proportion of medium to high density, is that solar power doesn't deliver the same amount of self-sufficiency that it does in a single residency. So we're developing neighbourhood power sharing schemes and community batteries to ensure that everyone in this area can benefit from the move to a clean energy system. We will definitely be encouraging that move in the policies that we introduce.
The Greens are proposing to go to net zero by 2035 because we cannot waste any more time. Science has been settled for years now, and the Greens have been campaigning on this for decades. Was it popular when we started to campaign on it and started to bring up climate change and having to change our way of life and energy systems? But now it feels like society is caught up and everyone is looking for climate action. And especially the youth, the climate protests just show that people are fed up and they know the information, they want action instead of just inaction. So, for tackling net zero, we can't just be looking at the energy sector, we have to take a holistic approach to the economy. That means cracking down on the record levels of land clearing that have happened in the state. We're on par with the Congo and Brazil for land clearing and are the first developed nation to have to be on the land clearing records list. We also need no more new coal and gas projects. Since 2016, the Liberal government has opened 23 new coal and gas projects. So it's all good to go on about renewables and how good you are and how the solar panels are coming along. But if you're still pouring flames of gas into the fire, there's really no point in the climate action and it has no substance to it. And also part of the transition as well, we need to support workers who work in the fossil fuel industry because we can't disrespect them. And we need to incentivise and move away from coal and gas.
The New South Wales Liberal National Government has committed to net zero. We've incorporated that through all of our policies across the entire government and the requirements for our public service to deliver that. And we have a 70% reduction by 2035, which is the most ambitious reduction that we see in the country. And that's been recognised by a range of different third-party entities, the New South Wales Liberal Government's approach to addressing climate change. Just last week we had the Clean Energy Council come out and recognise that 60% of all renewable projects that have been banked across the country are here in New South Wales. New South Wales has more than double that of Victoria and Queensland combined, and these are great Labor states. And our 70% target for 2035 is also much higher than the federal Labor government's climate emissions target. It's almost 30% higher than federal Labor today. So I'm really worried about what would happen in New South Wales if we had a Labor government, because the New South Wales Labor Party has not committed to a 70% by 2035 reduction. What we've done is we've planned how we're going to get there, because you can't just immediately overnight try and transition. We legislated the electricity roadmap back in 2021. This was a transformative piece of legislation that had catalysed almost $30 billion of investment in the transformation of our electricity system, firming, storage, transmission investment. And we've also put in our EV policy and investments, which the EV Council has said is the best in the country. So you've got a team that's got a plan, a vision, and the capacity to deliver the outcome.
I'm taking a different tack. I propose to take action rather than rhetoric. The 75% for 2035 announced by the Liberal Treasurer, what's not accompanied by any rules or legislation. I think it was a wish list, and the government's own data would say that at present we're tracking it's impossible. I'm committed to tabling a climate change bill in the Legislative Assembly that sets specific targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in New South Wales and sets them in law. It'll be aligned with the Commonwealth Act of May 22 to achieve net zero by 2050. We have an enormous task to meet that timing, mainly because we have huge road transport across the continent and air transport, and the amount of emissions from those are catastrophic, and it's going to be very difficult for us to temper those. The bill that I table will require Treasury to develop a climate change budget paper and ministers to table an annual climate change statement of actions taken to mitigate the impact of climate change within their portfolios and their progress towards meeting state emission targets.
Okay. IMOP does not believe in climate change. IMOP doesn't believe in renewables to the extent that my colleagues here have shared with you today. We do not believe that the world is warming up. Now, when someone says the science is settled, unfortunately, all I can say to that is, you're not a scientist, because no scientist will say that the science is settled. No scientist will say that. in all due honesty, unless they're lying. So, where do we go from here? Well, certainly we can see there's a lot of pollution on the planet, but I don't believe that solar, I don't believe that wind is a response to that. That is sustainable. We have enormous gas and coal reserves in this country. Thermal power can be incredibly clean. Do your research and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. I know there's too many problems globally with wind farms, with wind power generation, with solar power generation. Okay, thank you very much. I think you catch what I'm saying and what we stand for. Thank you.
But I don't think there's any doubt that this is a critical election for climate. We need stronger and faster climate action. We need to legislate our emissions reductions targets. And my targets are 60% reduction by 2030, 80% by 2035, and net zero by 2040. We must stop approving new fossil fuels projects. On its own information, the government's zero scorecard shows that they will not meet their emissions targets. Their own information says they will not meet their emissions targets. And of course we have to stop clearing our land. We must stop logging native forests and we must stop clearing high conservation value land. Biodiversity is critical. It's hand in glove with our climate action. We are currently clearing each year the equivalent of 59 Sydney CBDs. It's a disgrace.
James, this is you. The question is, in our electorate, we've lost thousands of aged care places over the past decade, and it does not seem like anything is changing in an area with an ageing population. What will you do to help people stay in the area that they love and have raised their family?
Yeah, I mean, housing is a big issue from young to old. In fact, I'm a renter in this area, barely paying the rent still, just holding on to a nice little brown brick apartment in Milson Precinct. But if you've seen the rental market over the last few years, it's become almost impossible. So the Greens are proposing more public housing. We want at least 10% of the housing supply in New South Wales to be public and affordable housing, or not-for-profit housing. And we want at least 100,000 new public houses built by 2030. So we need to be investing in these things because young and old are all getting priced out of the property market. Too often we leave the property game as an asset as opposed to a human right. Housing is a human right, but that's not what the developers think. And on that note as well, we can't just say no to developers, no. We need to be looking at ways where we can work with developers, and that sounds a bit strange coming from the Greens candidate, to get maximum community benefit out of new developments, including affordable housing in new developments as well. We can't just keep saying no to these projects because then they get rammed down our throats and we won't have good community input. And that's not to say, of course, aged care is a federal responsibility, and we saw during the pandemic how much that got botched. It's disgusting. We can't let that happen again.
I agree that it was incredibly concerning what we saw come out of the Royal Commission into aged care. When you look at the quality of care, when you look at as well the treatment of the workforce, and when you look at the cost, it's incredibly concerning for people thinking about their future and their loved ones and carers and family members worried about where they will be kept safe and where they will have a new home. I was at one of our local aged care centres just last week. And they have a lot of demand. They're really struggling to get the kind of capacity that they need for people also to stay close to home. So I think it's a really important question. We also have a couple of thousand people at any one time in New South Wales hospitals that actually should be discharged into the aged care system, but they don't have a bed to go to. So we're seeing the flow-on effects of what the federal government needs to step up on in aged care to ensure that we also reduce that impact on our healthcare system to keep those beds open for people who need that more acute care. So I'm very happy to work on any types of policies that support that. It's obviously, as James says, something that we have to work together across the Commonwealth of governments. but it's something that we're all very alive to. And whether that's in the planning space, whether it's in at-home care, whether it's in work around training nurses, whether it's in improving immigration options for new staff, whether it's upskilling, any of the possibilities that we have, but we need to make sure we're implementing those findings from the Royal Commission to make the biggest difference for people that need that care towards the end of their lives.
I think I'm going to join the generalities because I don't actually haven't made a specific policy about aged care. As someone said earlier, it's balanced between state and Commonwealth. But I've seen from my observation that a lot of these places have closed down because they're impossible to staff. The pay is so poor. The staff don't have credentials. There have been a number of scandals prior to the Royal Commission about the horror revelations of what occurred during the pandemic. And it doesn't surprise me that they've closed down, and more elderly people are struggling to stay at home with their partner or with their friends who probably would do a lot better in some sort of situation where they didn't have to cook and look after themselves. So we have James Milson, which is a wonderful place, I think, down in Kirribilli. When I've visited people there, I think it is a great aged care facility, but particularly those ones up in the high, on the ridge in Mossman all seem to have gone backwards, or they don't exist anymore. So I will certainly keep my eye on this and take an opportunity to speak about it when it's raised in Parliament, but I don't have a specific action in mind at the moment.
Okay, everybody in this room is going to be old at some point. I think we all agree on that. Many of you here could be homeless. The greatest population of homelessness in Australia is women over 50. I'm sure you've all heard this, and it's absolutely true, even in our electorate. Okay, what's going to happen? Are they going to fill the nursing homes if they exist? I very much believe in community, spending a lot of money in the community on improving old age care. It's as simple as that. But also, right now, we could do so much. I'm just looking at the moment at North Head, the government buildings up there that are just vacant, that could be developed for community housing for up to 200 or 300 people. It's there right now. It's not even being used. I don't know if you know. Go for a walk up Middlehead and you'll see it. Okay, George's Heights area. So, there's so much we can do right now in this electorate, because I don't want to see any of you homeless. That's the bottom line, and I don't want you seeing going into aged care, because homelessness does breed ill health, there's no doubt about it. And we want to see a healthy community to avoid going into, if possible, into aged care. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much.
Look, it has previously been mentioned, aged care is primarily a federal responsibility. But that doesn't mean to say the state can abrogate its responsibility in this regard. We are, in truth, a wealthy country, a wealthy state. It is a disgrace that we have very poor care, appalling conditions in some of our aged care facilities. The Royal Commission made that very clear. But people quickly forget, governments quickly forget those things and don't do anything about it. It does seem to me that this government wastes a lot of money. Rorts, we've got a whole lot of jobs for mates, we've got billions of dollars invested in the Transport Asset Holding Entity and iCare to prop them up. We've had huge amounts of money in overruns, cost overruns on infrastructure projects, on transport projects. We pay our public servants $800 million, the top level of our public servants. There's a lot of money that could be saved in this state. That money could be directed to supporting aged care, supporting staff, paying staff better, so we actually have aged care staff who can service our facilities. We should not, as a state, abrogate our responsibility in this regard.
Our family has had recent experience in trying to find a place for a person who needed care, and it was a traumatic experience. This person wasn't poor, he had money, we had huge difficulty in finding a place for him, a suitable place for him. Eventually we did. But it was symptomatic to me of the crisis in aged care that we're going through at the moment. And one of the major problems, yes, while the federal government is responsible primarily for this area of activity, the state government does have a responsibility too, and it lies primarily in the training of aged care workers and the lack of remuneration that they receive for the work that they do. They are overpaid, underpaid, overworked and undertrained. And we will be solving that through increasing financial resources going to TAFE and other training sectors to ensure that they are properly trained, and we will ensure that they are given a decent living wage for the outstanding service they perform for this community.
Thanks. Okay, so question 5 is privatisation. Do you support asset sales to fund government debt? Privatisation.
Well, let's be clear that the New South Wales Liberal Government has undertaken a whole tranche of asset recycling initiatives to fund infrastructure, not to fund government debt, so to fund new infrastructure. So yes, this is actually a policy, you remember we took the 2015 election, was the notion of taking the assets that we have, getting the equity from those and building and investing in the future for New South Wales. It's one of the reasons we have things like Sydney Metro being built while we have 3 of our local schools having major upgrades for the first time in a generation. It's one of the reasons we were able to have all the investment in our healthcare system that got us through the pandemic. So yes, we as New South Wales Liberals support asset recycling, but it has to be for the infrastructure that we need and then the infrastructure that will make a difference to people's lives. Because every time you invest, for instance, in a regional hospital or invest in school facilities being improved in our community, you're investing in the people who utilise those services. So you're creating better opportunities for kids for their opportunities for their future life. You're reducing the impacts on teachers that are trying to have the best access to resources in their schools. You're making sure that people out in country parts of New South Wales have better access to quality healthcare, which historically there's been a real city-country divide with those types of projects and investments. So what we do as a New South Wales Liberal Government, and we would continue to do this with a range of different projects, is ensure that we can continue to get more equity onto the balance sheet, that we can invest in more income-producing and productivity-enhancing infrastructure projects. These are all the kinds of projects that change people's lives, and we're actually really proud of our record in ensuring that we can deliver that.
No, I definitely don't support what the Premier's had to say about what sort of asset sales he would take on if elected, because the first cab off the rank was going to be Sydney Water. He subsequently said a month or so later that he'd ruled out Sydney Water, but it's still there and it's a prize, and there's a Norwegian group that is buying up water rights all over the world. Now, it doesn't sound so bad when we've got plenty of rain and plenty of water, but what happens with privatisation is that the infrastructure is run down, there's no proper maintenance done, the prices go up, and the consumers pay. And the privatisation we've seen to date, I suppose the one that's had the greatest impact is on road tolls. But imagine all of us with our water bills having to meet the cost of whatever it costs to buy Sydney Water or privatise it, and then to meet the cost to give profit to the people that own it. Particularly, it may be sold within Australia, but what's happening overseas is they're quickly being snuffled, rather as Macquarie Bank did a few years ago. This is a central sort of water pool. There's an economist of a couple of weeks ago that dealt with it.
Thank you. I certainly doesn't support the sale of any more assets. There's been too many sold already. Like my colleague here, the whole situation with Sydney Water could be an absolute disaster. It would mean each of us would have our water controlled by a central body. This is the problem we have with privatisation when it comes to anything. It's a small body of people controlling everybody else, whether it be the banks. And look, I look back to the wonderful Commonwealth Bank and why that was started. It started as a community bank. And now we don't have anything like that because of greater privatisation. I'm not against privatisation. I'm certainly not sort of suggesting a communist system or anything like that. Quite the opposite. I believe we should own and deal with things ourselves, but not when a very small quantity of people control the whole scenario. And that's what would happen, for instance, with our water, if that gets solved. Just bear that in mind. Do your own research, people, and you'll see what I'm saying is 100% fact. Thank you.
Well, I certainly don't support any further privatisation because I look at the record of this government in the privatisation it's undertaken to date. So it's raised a lot of money. And where's that money gone? It's gone to big infrastructure projects. It's gone to big transport projects, all of which have gone way over their budget. There are cost blowouts, and we're talking about billions of dollars. This money that was raised did not go into schools or hospitals or public transport. It went into those projects that have been incompetently managed. So billions of dollars of our money has been wasted, and those assets are no longer in public hands. So Sydney Water, I don't think so. I don't think it's appropriate to privatise Sydney Water. Certainly this government doesn't have the credentials to establish that it could do that responsibly. And if you want to see a disaster for privatisation of water services, look at the UK.
I can make this undertaking that if the Labor Party forms government in the state of New South Wales, there will be no more privatisations or, quote, asset recycling, unquote, as the current government euphemistically describes it. Why? Because any number of studies around the world have revealed that where there is a natural monopoly, privatisation of a once public service results in higher price increase of that service, lower quality of service delivered, and a loss of revenue to the government. We will not be privatising Sydney Water, we will not be privatising the Western Harbour Tunnel, and we will ensure that the undertaking which the government is currently giving, that it is not going to be privatising Sydney Water, is adhered to. And it's a strange record because I don't know if you've read the media recently, that there have been leaks of some confidential documents from the government, which has publicly denied that it includes privatisation while it's going ahead with the process by stealth. For example, a major project in the western suburbs, the waste management facility for Western Sydney, is being privatised, and it's intended that this will continue. So it's privatisation by stealth, even if an announcement has been made that Sydney Water itself won't be privatised. So this is our undertaking. We will not be privatising any other projects.
The Greens vehemently oppose privatisation of public assets. Public assets are for the public good, not for private wealth. We've seen it with their power grid. It's been privatised, now power prices are through the roof. Buses have been privatised recently, and service has been shocking. We have huge driver shortages and bus routes cancelled all over our electorate. The Northern Beaches Hospital, built by the public tax dollar, then sold to private companies so people can profit of people becoming sick. It's disgusting. Toll roads. We're the most heavily tolled jurisdiction in the world. It's great, isn't it? I mean, I don't drive a car, but here it's quite expensive out there. And again, it's our tax money that paid for these roads originally, and now private corporations are profiting from tolling us to use the roads we paid for. Aged care as well, we were talking about a little bit earlier. Private providers did far worse during the COVID pandemic because the rules, regulations, oversight was so weak. No more privatisation, ladies and gentlemen. The way we raise our tax base is to tax the super wealthy and close corporate loopholes, okay? We need to be taxing corporations to pay for the public amenity that they've been taken away from us. The last one I'd like to mention as well is creating the private water market in Murray-Darling has led to environmental catastrophe. The fish kills, the low water streams. When we privatise our shared assets, it's awful for the community. We can have no more of it.
So there is community support for the provision of the fold-back ramp design for the Sydney Harbour Bridge cycleway project. What is your position if elected, what will you do?
I believe it's been proved. That's my understanding of it. It was an enormous battle a few weeks ago, and I certainly made my position clear that I wasn't opposed to having a ramp up to the bridge, but the design was quite inadequate. It was going to damage the park. It was too wide and went straight into the narrow bikeway across the bridge, and it was going to attract. My understanding was these for hire companies that have set up in the rocks hiring electric bikes for tourists. So I didn't think the cycle riders were going to have much of a good time on the bridge. So, but I understand 2 weeks ago the matter was put to bed and it's now been approved.
I feel that this cycle, it's just yet another expenditure that's unnecessary. I mean, have you seen those guys that push the bikes up and look, I'll come down. I don't think we need it. I really don't think we need it. And again, it's unnecessary government expenditure, which my party certainly do not support. Just as my colleague over here said, electrical bikes, e-bikes, look, there's a lot of reasons why, and it's an eyesore. If it happens, it'll be a terrible eyesore. I really hope it doesn't go ahead. But it looks like it is, so I'm sorry. What can I say? Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry to say this, Michael, but I think when I go around the community, I think it's very clear that people accept we need a new cycleway. The current steps, they don't really work. We know that we need a cycleway that will meet the needs of diverse bike riders, and we need active transport for a livable city. So I think the cycleway is very important. But by the same token, the proposals that have been put forward have serious impacts in a number of areas, impacts on green space, on parking, on safety, on heritage. So there are a lot of considerations in determining what is the appropriate way to go. There's been sort of consultation of sorts, but there has been no attempt by the government to bring the parties together. The government has just sat back and let the parties fight it out, and it is a very divisive issue. But we need to have collaboration, we need to have some compromise here. So if I'm elected, what I would do was immediately establish a team with an external facilitator to bring all the parties together to try and reach an agreed solution, because there is some agreement. There is an agreement around the ramp. We just need to work out what is the best option, taking into account all the interests of the various parties.
I'm a great believer in negotiation to achieve a win-win result. And I think that this can be achieved and could have been achieved in the previous period leading up to this decision. And I call on this government to hold back, to stop, and to engage in genuine community consultation. We do need a decent bike ramp. The cyclists can't put up with that terrible ramp and steps that they have to put up with now. At the same time, the citizens of Milson's Point should not have their precious park destroyed by a ramp. We need to, and it is possible to build something which satisfies both the cyclists and the good residents of Milson's Point. And I call on this government to hold back and to give it another go and have genuine consultation so that we can have a win-win solution to this problem.
South Wales is putting it through Transport for New South Wales, look, I did meet with the community ramp advocates, and I think they do have a strong case. There is some advantages to the community ramp. However, if we continue to delay this project, it will not go ahead. This has been going on for decades now, the need for a cycle ramp, and we've had plenty of community consultation. Unfortunately, Transport for New South Wales hasn't gone about that in a right way, but it has been done, and there's overwhelming support in the broader community for a linear cycle ramp. And I know that might be a tough pill to swallow, but there's been countless surveys, community consultations, where people will support the linear ramp. There's been a lot of myths about the destruction of the park. Talking about 4 trees here, that will be replaced by 16 trees. When it comes to infrastructure, we actually need to look at the broader picture, the bigger picture. Milson's Point is one part of a much wider community. We look at the Harbour Bridge. There was thousands of houses lost, businesses lost when they built that. There will be no houses lost with this linear ramp. There won't be any destruction of people's property. We need this cycling infrastructure to get traffic off the street, reduce pollution in our area, and encourage people to cycle. Because right now, North Sydney is a black hole for cycling infrastructure. North Sydney Council has built 0 metres of new cycleways in the last year. This is pathetic, alright? We need to get this ramp going and we need more cycling infrastructure. Any more delays, it's just not going to happen.
I also agree that we need a ramp cycleway to access the Harbour Bridge. It's actually something that was raised with me when I was first elected by local residents, particularly concerned about people who would ride down the middle of the ramp, on the stairs, the clash points with pedestrians. And it has been, let's say, a very lengthy journey to date. I can see a couple of different people here that I've walked through Bradfield Park with on numerous occasions, looking at different designs with, had lots of conversations with over the years about how to improve the different proposals that have been put forward. And we're at a point now where we have a design put forward by Transport for New South Wales, which is the linear ramp that James has explained. And that proposal has now had a vote of council, which I think is what Victoria is referring to, for landowners' consent for an application to then be lodged for a heritage approval and a DA. What I want to be clear about is that there's no final decision that's been made on this project. Yes, the government supports and I support a ramp, but no final decision has been made on the design and any of the detail around its delivery as of yet. So we haven't lodged a development application. We haven't even applied for heritage approval yet. We haven't taken the types of steps you need to do when you're fundamentally proceeding with something that you've put to the community. I've had the Minister responsible, Rob Stokes, commit to me, and I've shared his correspondence with people, that we will go back to the design after the election, if we're returned as a government, to revisit what we can do to make sure we get the ramp, but get the right outcome for our local community.
My lecture's pretty good. We actually have 7 questions because there were going to be 7 candidates here, but Sustainable Australia had to pull out at the last minute. But I would like to ask this last question. Anyone, for you guys, or Michael, if you want to take a question, thank you. So there is intense community concern about overdevelopment and the impacts of increasing density. How will you address these issues if elected?
Okay, well, as I said earlier, we very much at IMOB support regional development. And yes, if we can encourage more people to move to the country areas of our beautiful state, that would be wonderful. And I think it's starting to happen. We just want to see more community groups, just pockets here and there, doing this, pushing to get people out of the city. And what's happening in a lot of country areas, you're really aware now, that the government are bringing in these to encourage doctors or people to study medicine in regional areas, because if they do that, they will stay there. Look, I'm right behind that. We want to see more of that decentralisation, because yes, our cities are getting overcrowded. This is why the problem with the freeway, that's aged care, all the things that have come through tonight is very much about an overcrowded city, and we want to see some sort of big change, more people moving to country areas. Thank you.
Well, I think everybody accepts that we have to have development in an urbanised society like we live in. But when we look at the density, in the electorate of North Shore, we have a very heavy density, most particularly in the North Sydney side of the electorate, but a pretty dense population also in the Mosman side of the electorate. Far denser, I might say, than the average across the whole of Sydney. So that's a very significant consideration when we look at development. But frankly, the only way to resolve this issue is to revamp and completely overhaul the planning system. The government's in the thrall of developers and toll operators. The community doesn't get a look in. So we have state environmental planning policies that ultimately overtake local environmental plans. Community is not heard, and when I go around the community, it is the common complaint, and development is a big issue in this community, and people are saying, we actually want to have a say, and they don't have a say. And the other very significant issue is, because of the way the planning system is working, there's not proper strategic planning. So we do not have proper planning around infrastructure, around large developments. So we don't have enough green space, we don't have proper traffic management, and we don't have proper infrastructure and services.
I endorse everything that Helen has just said. I've had personal experience on council of dealing with development applications which have been rejected by council, but they've been able to go around us and get these developments going ahead. So we have unplanned property developments, not taking into account the need for provision of adequate local infrastructure, such as roads, public transport, schools, medical centres, shops, public recreational spaces. And the local environment as well, the overshadowing of houses resulting from high-rise developments, unplanned, unregulated high-rise developments going ahead. It is shameful, and it's got to stop. We will in government ensure that all these factors are taken into account. We accept that there needs to be medium to high density housing in places, certainly in areas of North Sydney. This has already happened. It's not a question of saying whether or not we should have it, but it's already there. And a lot of it has been unplanned and unregulated. This has got to stop, and Labor will ensure that in government we will take into account community wishes and community needs much more than is taking place at the moment. And that includes greater recognition of local councils' roles in this property development process.
In New South Wales, developers are running amok. They're in control of the planning system, and this has to stop. Unfortunately, one of the major parties still accepts donations from developers or subsidiaries of developers. They have ways of weaseling them in. At least the Labor Party has banned property developer donors, and the Greens definitely don't accept them. The member for Drummoyne, John Sidoti, stepped down because of conflicts of interest by buying a property near the new metro site. I remember once a young Liberal friend actually invited me to a networking event with developers, young Liberals and developers together. This has to stop. We need to put environmental concerns and social concerns at the top of our planning process, not economic concerns. We need to give more powers to the Environmental Protection Agency so they can't just issue fines and all that. They actually need to have legal status to enforce laws, not just provide warnings. We also need to give powers back to local councils. Because too often, developers will apply for a new site with the local council, get denied, and then just go to a higher authority and get it pushed through. And this higher authority, the planning commissions, they're not elected. They're political appointments. So we need to give the power back to local councils to decide the futures of their areas. We also need stronger building codes, because a lot of the new buildings that are being built are not to environmental standards and safety standards. Take Oval Towers, take Mascot Towers, for example, crumbling due to poor building standards.
One of the things I love most about our community is actually how vibrant we are, and part of that is because we are a dense community and have been for so many decades, well before I was alive. And you look around Kirribilli, for instance, and that's one of the things that makes us so bustling, is that we have these apartments that have been here for such a long period of time, and the diversity of people that come along and live in apartments. I mean, I live in an apartment, I'm raising my 2 children in an apartment, and more families are doing that. I don't know how you would get people of my demographic being able to even afford to live in a community like this if we all have to try and afford to live in a freestanding house. So I think that there is a really strong case for us having density because it makes things more affordable, it makes it more vibrant, but density has to be done well, and we need really good developments, quality developments for the people who live inside of that building and for the people outside of that building, and there have to be appropriate processes in place for that to occur. We also need to make sure that we are investing in the infrastructure and services that we need, and that's what we've been doing as a state government. You'd see the unprecedented levels of investment in infrastructure and services in our area, and that's not something that ever happened under Labor, if you recall back to the bad old days of Labor, including with Part 3A, which we abolished as a Liberal government. But I just want to point out, just yesterday, Chris Minns came out and said that we need more development across the lower North Shore of Sydney. And when he was asked which suburbs he wanted to dump density in, he named North Sydney, Crow's Nest, and my favourite, he said, Mossman. So when it comes to your decision between Liberal and Labor and planning and our communities, there's only one horse you can back in that race, and that's the New South Wales Liberal government.
Thank you. I'll just start by saying I put this as in the consultation I had, particularly across the precinct meetings and in meetings in Mossman. It was state planning and development that was the major concern that was raised with me. And for all the reasons that have been said by speakers to now, but particularly the rolling over of local councils. So local councils, the local environmental plans that were developed that are statutory instruments that they did with broad consultation in the community, completely bypassed for the benefit of developers. There are now, I think, 7 proposals that have gone through the process of the state planning panels to ministerial approval for them to go for rezoning, which will mean eventually we're going to have a row of towers from St Leonards to North Sydney, and we're going to be living in the shadow of them. And I have undertaken to take specific action as I can in Parliament to table a bill in the Legislative Assembly to replace the moribund Environmental Planning and Assessment Act of 1979. When it came out, it was a model act. I worked with planners from Canada and England that came to Australia to work under it because it was so far-sighted, but it is now moribund. And I want to put up a new act, a new proposal to Parliament, a new bill for discussion that takes account of climate change issues and that is a planning act for the 21st century because the 79 Act has been demolished. Thank you.
No, it is very hot up here. I just want to check the running water. Okay, so now it's time for the quick fire round. This is just a bit of fun, really. This is just, we had so many questions come in on so many topics that really couldn't be covered in like one more question. So this is just a way for everybody to let you know where they stand on certain issues. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, also from the community. Candidates, if you've got your cards, will hold up cards of yes, no and maybe to let you know where they stand. Okay, so I'll begin. Do you support the new purpose-built dogs and cats home in Kurnell? That was quite popular. Okay. Lots of maybes. Maybe. Cats, maybe. Okay. Do you support the cashless gaming card? Do you support the Indigenous voice to Parliament? Do you support the establishment of a koala protection support? The establishment of koala protection support on the coast on public and private land? Hello? Okay. Do you support the extension of the nurse-to-patient ratio system? Do you support the state government paying for the decontamination of Berries Bay? Decontamination. So when the remediation. Okay. Do you support the extension of Taronga Zoo into the national park? Do you think the current state government has protected and created sufficient green spaces in the seat of the North Shore? And my personal favourite. Do you support the Slovenian lubricant trial for the train line in Wollstonecraft? The audience to join me in thanking all of our candidates. Before we go, I'm going to give each of the candidates now 1 minute each to pitch to you why you should vote for them. Seeing as we had Michael next, Helen.
Well, the current government is tired and out of touch, and it's run out of ideas. We need more independence to inject energy into New South Wales politics and ensure communities are treated with respect. This government continues to debase process and openly engage in rorting. And if they're not called to account, this behaviour will become normalised to the very great detriment of our democracy. Politics needs to be done differently. North Shore deserves a strong local voice it can really trust. I'll foster and maintain an ongoing dialogue with the community so I can represent North Shore with authenticity and integrity. I will work tirelessly to ensure the government is more functional through evidence-based, transparent decision-making executed with integrity. I'll turn up every day and I'll get the job done. As a community independent, I won't be constrained by a party platform, by party factions or by powerful vested interests. I'll simply be a captive of the North Shore community.
We currently face a government that is riddled with infighting, that doesn't deliver on its promise, that hasn't delivered on the things that matter to us, and we need change. We need a change of government. If Labor wins government on the 25th of March, and I'm honoured to be your representative in Parliament, we will deliver on our promises in government, not shouting from afar on a crossbench. And in this term of government, we will introduce the reforms that people of New South Wales so desperately need in health, in education, in public transport, in opposing privatisation, in giving the recognition to our First Nations people that they justly deserve, and in introducing effective climate change. We will deliver on our promises.
I always really like the saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We need a new breed of politician in New South Wales. We can't keep electing parties and candidates who have profited too much from fossil fuel companies. We need everyday candidates from the local area. I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, I've ever been in a boardroom. The closest I've ever went was when I had a job interview at North Basketball. They held it at the end of the boardroom. I'm an everyday local. I work for the local newspaper, so every day I'm out there listening to residents, businesses, and the concerns of our community, and also the opportunities in this area as well. as in my work, working for North's Basketball, I talk to families, kids, and grown adults as well. Every day I'm out there serving this community already, and I can guarantee you I'm going to get paid a whole lot to do it. That's how you know you can trust me. I'm not getting paid to do this. I don't get bankrolled at all. I'm actually losing money by running in this election because I care. And we need to stand up for more public transport, protecting our biodiversity, stopping the rampant corruption, and stop business as usual, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot continue down this path. We need change. That's why I should vote for the Greens and a true local candidate, me, James.
I really love being your local representative, and being elected meant that I got to go out and spend every single day talking with people, listening to their views, making sure I could act on the issues that were important to them, and that's from really micro issues to some of the really big outcomes for our community. And I've been really proud to be able to deliver significant outcomes for our community, whether that's solving different problems across the community or some of the big investments that we've delivered. And we know that only the New South Wales Liberals will ever invest in our community, because that's the only time we've ever had that investment is with a Liberal government, not with a Labor government. But we also know that Labor can't manage money. So what we've got in New South Wales is we have an economic plan to make sure that we can keep our state moving forward. There are really uncertain times out there at the moment economically. You know, we've had 10 interest rate rises in a row. We've got people coming off fixed-term mortgages. We've got people struggling to get into the rental market. People are worried about what comes next, and we need to have adult leadership with experience in charge to make sure that we can manage those challenges alongside the community. So we're going to build a stronger community. We're going to keep building the infrastructure that we need. We're going to make sure that we support local communities. We're going to put downward pressure on household budgets, and we're going to make sure that we deliver the infrastructure and services that our communities need. That's what we've done throughout our term in Parliament, and we've got a plan to make sure we can continue delivering for the people of New South Wales and right here in North Shore. So I'd be really proud to have your support and be returned as your local member. Thank you.
The electorate in Australia is generally extremely tolerant. They see misdemeanors in government, and their attitude is often, we'll deal with that at the ballot box. We'll toss the ballot. This is censored. Government's had a certain time, and then it's time for change. But underneath that, the thing that concerns me is that the incoming party, often their attitude is, well, I want what you've got. You know, I want the same. There isn't a commitment to reform, and that's one of the reasons why I am standing as an independent. Only independents can force change in Parliament. And Parliament, the committees that run it have virtually run it down. I said 43 days last year it met, 40 days the year before. There is nothing goes on in there. They have control, they control what can be said. There are rules for the members that they can speak for 60 seconds, but they're not allowed to talk about policy or criticise anything. It is absolute despair to see what has gone on by complicit agreement between the major parties on committees like the Privileges Committee. So I've said quite publicly at the beginning, I want to go in there and blow it apart, and I want to get the members on side to be able to represent their electorates, not just to toe the party line and go in and go through the theatre and the mind that goes on in Parliament when the decisions are taken in the party rooms, the legislation is written, with the benefactors of the party. Thank you.
Gee, the final word. Thank you. Okay, well look, I've got to say this. Look, and with all due respect to everyone here and everyone up here, politics in this country, politics globally, has lost its way. In our country, in our state, in this community here, it's the same old, same old, same old. The three major parties and others have lost their way. Now, we live in a brave new world. There are amazing things happening every day. The same old politics that we've had for the last 100 years in this country doesn't work anymore. Informed medical option parties offers a new voice, We have an amazing team. We've got people running in the Senate. We can make an enormous difference. And we're new, we're fresh. We don't play to the old rules. Yes, we have a lot of controversial ideas. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of us. We stand for informed medical choice. And our opinions and our thoughts and our concerns over the last few years, the pandemic, been very, very dire indeed. And we've addressed that in the only way we personally can. So I invite you to embrace something new and don't turn back to, sorry, I didn't mean to point to my colleagues here, but don't turn back to the way things have been for the last 100 years. We can't do it. We have to create a new world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So now I'm going to ask you to join me in thanking the candidates for participating. I'm going to hand back to the lovely Estelle.
And I ask the candidates to thank the audience and the questions. That was really good. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to thank everyone for sending in your questions. They were absolutely fabulous. We were inundated. I did not expect quite as many. So we've got such an informed community. It's fabulous. I also want to thank Loreto for hosting us tonight. In particular, Sharon, who's here. She stayed here. Thank you. And Anna and Linda. Milson Precinct really, really appreciates your friendship and commitment to being good neighbours. I'd also like to thank Katie, our moderator. Chris, who's videoing everything tonight. Thank you, Chris. We've also got our ushers, Scarlett and Ashley and Tessa, I think with you. I don't know if they're still here, but thank you. I'd also like to thank North Sydney Council for your assistance with organising this and your unwavering support of the precincts. I have one final message for everyone tonight. If you have not joined your local precinct, please do. They are fabulous. We meet the first Thursday of every month, and we've built such an amazing community network, and with your involvement, it can only get better. There's ones for everywhere. I can see lots of precinct people here tonight, from Wollston Craft to Cremorne and Kirribilli. So, yeah, okay. I think Gillian wanted to say something.
I would just like to thank all of you for coming, and I'd really like to thank all of the candidates to show up here on such a hot night, and Katie for your wonderful Chris, thanks for the video stuff, but most importantly, I'd like to thank Estelle. Taken Milson Precinct so far in the last, 8 months or whatever it's been, being the secretary, that it's absolutely fantastic. If you can get some young people like Estelle involved, it just improves your whole community engagement process. So thank you very much, Estelle, for putting this on. And can I just say, although we meet the first Thursday, the next Thursday for April happens to be Holy Thursday, so we're not meeting. Right? It's Easter. So, although she just did that herself for that, it will be made. Thank you.